health support in the gender transitioning process in India. Let's give her a warm welcome with a huge round of applause.
Question for all the men in the audience. Imagine standing in front of a mirror while you're getting ready for an event and you're about to shave your face when you realize that instead of coarse stubble, your cheeks are smooth and plain. You look a bit lower and instead of a flat chest, there are mounds on your chest. And when you try to scream out in horror, instead of a deep voice echoing back, what you hear is a shrill, high-pitched cry. How would that make you feel? How would it feel to live in a body that you don't relate to? This is a glimpse into what gender dysphoria looks like, and this doesn't even begin to explain what trans people feel on the daily. In simple words, gender dysphoria is the sense of unease and distress experienced when one's gender identity, that is, their deeply felt sense of being man, woman, or something else, doesn't align with the sex assigned to them at birth. And this is often compounded by a society that fails to understand, support, or affirm them. This topic is extremely close to my heart. I've seen people very close to me go through intensely difficult times while coming to terms with their gender identity and dealing with dysphoria. Yet, officially transitioning was never on their mind, despite the crippling distress that they were in, simply because, on top of the financial barriers, the systemic hurdles were just too deep to navigate. Witnessing these experiences so closely made me realize that after becoming an MHP, not only do I want to work particularly with queer individuals, but I also want to start a discourse on how and why queer affirmative care needs to be revolutionized. In India, gender transition involves social, medical, and legal steps. Social transition typically begins with adopting names and pronouns that align with one's gender identity. Medical transition involves hormone replacement therapy and optional gender-affirming surgeries. And legally, one can change their name and gender markers on documents. Now, despite the 2014 NALSA judgment affirming self-identification without surgery, there are several institutions that still require proof of medical transition for legal recognition, thereby reflecting gaps between policy and practice. This whole thing might seem like a linear process, but in reality, the system only adds to the distress of trans individuals instead of alleviating it. Imagine needing permission to be yourself. In India, gender transition isn't just a personal journey. It is a long, tedious procedure of seeking approval from the government, medical professionals, and the society. The 2014 National Transgender Equality Survey showed that almost 30% trans individuals reported experiencing anxiety and depression as a direct result of navigating these bureaucratic systems. And that is a large population. Because the system doesn't take into account the subjectivity of trans experiences. The expectation is of a singular, defining aha moment of realization that one is trans, which is a myopic view that ignores how diverse these experiences can be. So what is our role as advocates of mental health in easing the emotional strain on trans individuals? For starters, healthcare providers should be educated to understand that gender identity is deeply personal and doesn't fit into neat boxes. Therefore, getting a diagnosis for gender dysphoria should be an easy first step. The mandatory counseling required during the transition process shouldn't be a means of deterring individuals from their decisions. Instead, it should be focused on disseminating information about the process, preparing them for the changes brought on by hormone therapy, and connecting them to supportive communities. How do you think gender affirmative healthcare and therapy can be made better? Well, to start, psychology programs should have mandatory modules on topics such as queer theory, gender theory, and feminist ideology, where we explore the concept of gender as a social construct rather than a fixed biological reality. This would also help therapists and counselors understand the complexities of identity, power dynamics, and societal norms. And this would help them approach their clients' issues from a more informed lens, even if they don't specialize in queer affirmative care. Peer support groups and mentorship programs can also help build these skills. The more we interact with people from the community, the more empathetic we become to these lived experiences, and they stop feeling like isolated phenomena. I think all of us will agree with me when I say that in my line of work, empathy and the willingness to provide support are non-negotiables. And this can be inculcated by filling the gaps in knowledge, by knowing more about the people we are working with. Because these gaps in knowledge result in extremely dehumanizing practices, such as treating gender dysphoria as a curiosity and the client as the means to satiate this curiosity. As a therapist, one must know the art of asking the right questions. For example, if a client mentions seeing a fellow trans person and feeling a deep ache of yearning, like, hey, I might want to be like that, instead of asking, why do you feel like that? Or have you always felt like that? A therapist could maybe say, well, not every person who sees a trans person around might feel that way. Tell me what makes you experience such deep feelings of yearning. If we talk from a more theoretical lens, a blend of therapy techniques such as narrative therapy, CBT, and support groups usually works best. One of my friends shared with me how in narrative therapy, they were asked to reconstruct their life story in a way that highlights their resilience and self-discovery rather than it being one that is defined by societal norms, and how empowering it was for them. I am a huge believer of self-determination, and I truly believe that nobody knows an individual better than themselves. Not the government, not the family, not even a therapist. So, as a community, our collective consciousness should be aimed at building a society where everyone feels seen, respected, and comfortable in living their chosen reality. I think it's time that we abandon our regressive approach towards a phenomenon that has existed since time immemorial, and instead focus our efforts towards normalizing and streamlining it. After all, the paramount metric of a society's progress isn't how it treats its majority, but how it uplifts its most marginalized and disadvantaged communities. Thank you very much.